Okay. Hello, everyone. I see some returning names, so that's exciting always. Welcome to the third Exago Support Lab, and Happy New Year to all of you. Just so I know that I'm coming through loud and clear, if everyone could do me a favor and type a Y or a yes in the question pane as usual, that would be great, just so I know that you can all hear me. All right, great. They're starting to come through. Perfect. All right. So we have a really fun lab plan today. My name is Emma, and I'm here with my wonderful colleague, Nicole Hittner. As last weekend, along with the nature of the labs, this topic is also based on actually 2 real tickets that were submitted by our clients. We also selected this ticket based on suggested topics that you all told us you'd like to learn more about. We have amended, of course, as usual, the data that is being reported on to our Northwind data set. And the output is modified a bit so that it does make sense in this context. But the methods are those that we did suggest in the ticket, so it is exactly how we suggested that they handle this particular issue. So in this situation, the client presented us with a Crosstab report and was asking for some functionality that they couldn't find a way to make it work in there. We provided this particular client with a fun, I think it's fun, creative solution that allowed her to mimic a Crosstab report with the additional functionality she was looking for with using the standard designer. We additionally drew from another ticket that was solved with a simple explanation of how to use and further implement custom columns. It's a functionality that's new to version 2016.3, and we're really excited to go through with you today how exactly to implement that. It's a very simple solution, but it can be very handy in a lot of different ways. So we're going to begin by showing you how to create these, and then we'll show them implemented on our report in conjunction with the other information that we intend to highlight regarding those Crosstab reports. Okay, so as I said, we're going to begin with the creation of the custom column, so I'm going to navigate over to my application. And we're going to begin in the admin console today because that's where we're actually going to go through that creation. So you can see here, I'll actually start from scratch. So if I'm right in my admin console, I'm going to navigate to my objects. And the custom column that I wish to create today is revenue. So if you've been to our trainings, we often use similar fields and formulas to illustrate things for you because we are using Northwind, and some formulas are they lend themselves to illustrating what we're trying to show you guys. Today we're going to create a custom column on revenue so that instead of using the formula in the designer every time, I'm manipulating that unit price field along with the quantity field to create the revenue. We're going to make its own field. So if I go ahead into order details, because that's what order details is what contains the values, I'm going to use column metadata again. So I do see some names that were here last month, and last month we focused quite a bit in the metadata section of the admin console. We showed you some formatting you can do there, some ways to manipulate how your date, time, and currency fields display on your output, so it eliminated a little bit of manipulation that would have had to be done on a report level. Today we're going to again go into this column metadata, but we're going to show you how to do something a little different. So if I click here in the metadata, it brings this up. I'm going to go ahead and delete this so that I can show you how to make it from scratch. So this is the custom column that we're going to be creating. So I'm going to begin by clicking Add New down here. And you can see the tooltip explains that we're going to create a formula that will appear as a data field. So this is the whole idea of creating a custom column, that it's a data field based on a formula that's pulling fields from the database. So I'm going to call it revenue. This is just what you want it to be identified as. Oops, give me 1 second. Since I just deleted it, it thinks it's still there. Great. We're going to do revenue. Okay. So then here we have a couple fields that it's asking us to populate. So the first one is data type. We're going to choose data type currency because this revenue is going to always be a currency data type. We did last month, again, when we were working in the metadata, we explained to you that you can set a data type to be currency, and then if you set formatting specifications in the admin console regarding currency data types, it will display as such automatically rather than setting it as an integer and having to then format it on the report level. So this again can save some time and effort in your report making. We're going to make the alias revenue as well, just a name for it. And then the value is simply going to be the formula that we would have used on the report level to create this field. So if we wanted to see the revenue on a report level, we would simply enter, and I'll go ahead into our formula editor. We would do from the order details, quantity times unit price, and that's going to give us the revenue. So that's all I have to put for the value. I'm just going to copy it and paste it into my sort and group by value and press OK. If I apply, we can see that in my application, just refresh really quick. If I run a report, and this report does use this field, we can see that in this formula, which is already a little bit wonky and long and might look complicated to someone not familiar with it, don't worry yet. We are going to go through this Nicole goes through it in great detail later, so you'll understand this completely. But you can see that in an already long formula, we're able to bring a field rather than another formula additionally into it. So it really simplifies all of it. And if I was just, maybe I just wanted to see the revenue displayed in a cell, instead of having to make a formula at all, I just have to drag on a field. So custom columns can be really, really helpful there. They're very simple. They're not something that require a large amount of technical knowledge beyond creating a formula and then a little bit of navigation of the admin console. All right. So that was the little intro. This is really the meat of the presentation. We're going to show you this Crosstab report, and we're going to show you how to make something that looks like it and displays the data in a aesthetically pleasing way as Crosstabs do, but add some additional functionality that you might want to be able to use on your reports. There's a couple of limitations of the Crosstab Designer, as with many things designed to simplify the process for you. You go through a wizard. It's a very simple process. It's very easy. It organizes it in a beautiful way. There's themes that you can set up. However, there is a couple things, as with this ticket, that are not that are limitations of the Crosstab Designer. Okay. So I've brought up this crosstab that we made for the purposes to illustrate what we're looking to do in our example using the standard report designer. So crosstabs are Exago's version of a pivot chart. This crosstab widget right here will expand. Here, if I click and go back into the wizard, we can actually see exactly how our data is organized. So up here we have row header sources, column header sources, and then tabulation data sources. The row header sources are going to expand down along the side here. So you can see that our first row header source is employees.fullname, and that is the leftmost column here. And then our second is customers.company name, and that is our second column. On the top, we have our top column header source. So our first one is we're manipulating orders.orderDate twice to display the year and then the month. And that's going to display the year up here and then the month right below it here. This tabulation data is the intersection of all of these. So when the year, the month, the company, and the name of the employee are all the same, the tabulation source will display. All right. So the idea of the crosstabs really, as we kind of have touched on, is just it's a way to dynamically expand the data so that each value in the column header source receives its own column, and each value in the row header source receives its own row, rather than in a standard designer just having one cell when you add a data value. We do have options to perform aggregate calculations on the first source of every category. So this first row header source, if I select this little notebook over here, it's going to bring up options to change the label. So I can call it maybe employee name. And you'll see that if I press OK here, it updates live time in my preview. I also have options, and this is the same employee full name, to place a total somewhere. So if maybe I want a total for each employee, and I want to place it at the bottom, and I'm going to label it total. So if you watch the interactive preview down here, you can see that those totals are populating after every company. I also have these options for each year. So if I again click here and edit the header, I can change again. So I'll change this one to year. And then I can place a total. So here I'm not, I don't want totals for years, say, so I'm not going to do this one, but I do have the option. The other thing I want to note is that you do not have options to total a second or subsequent header source row or column. So the first ones I have options. On these you'll see I do not have total options down here. For my tabulation data source, I can additionally total, and here I have a little bit more control over how this is done. So I can choose the method, and we have the standard sum, average, count, min, and max. And then I can choose the value, so I can aggregate it. It can be a % of the row or a % of the column. So what this is giving us is that of this tabulation data, I can aggregate all of it. I can take a %, so maybe I want to know what % of the revenue was generated in this year, and then what % of the revenue was generated in this year. I can do that. I can show the % of column for my tabulation data. Okay, so there is options in Crosstabs. It's very easy to put together. You have summary options for many different sources. You're walked right through the design in the wizard. It gives us a nice clean output. We have themes. We have implemented a theme here, and we're able to format it nicely so that it's not just black and white right off the bat with one click, and it's super nice. And we do have lots of those summation options as I just went through. So while the Crosstabs widget is awesome, there is a couple of things that we are not able to do in here that I do want to give you guys a workaround. So if maybe you do want a Crosstab report, but instead of these blanks here, you want to show zeros instead. So if you have a null value, you'd rather see 0 than a blank. Maybe we want to be able to drill into this. So maybe for each of these company names, I want more information regarding them. I want to be able to click on the company name and see their address, see where I'm going to be shipping this order to. I'm also have the possibility in the standard report designer of conditional formatting and AggDistinctCount. I don't know how familiar you guys are with our formulas and functions. We do go through AggCount in the trainings, so I assume a little bit of a basic understanding of that. AggDistinctCount simply counts only unique values, and it can be a handy tool to use that is available in the standard report designer. And then finally, it's often common to calculate year-over-year percentages. So maybe you want to see how this month did, this July, in 2014 compared to how July did in 2015. And there's no option for manipulation of complex calculations on here because it's all generated at one time. So you can't then take this data and manipulate it to create something else. Okay, so with all of that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Nicole. She's going to walk you guys through the first few of these possibilities in the standard report designer and really how you mimic that crosstab report in a standard report designer, because it is not the intention to create dynamic rows and columns. So without further ado, Nicole.
Hi everybody, thanks so much, Emma. So as Emma said, I'm going to start us off by looking at a full static crosstab, what we know as the static crosstab here at Exago. Just one moment. So those of you familiar with the application through the basic training or through your own experience recognize this as the standard report designer. But what we have here is going to mimic the way a crosstab works. Instead of the application expanding your fields dynamically, horizontally, and vertically, the difference here is that you're going to want to do that manually using formulas. And this may look a little bit intimidating at the moment. Actually, I think I'm looking at the yes, this is the correct report. So this may look a little bit intimidating just because we have so many formulas here, but we're going to break those down so that we can really isolate what's going on here. But I do want to draw your attention to a few functionalities that are not supported by the Crosstab Designer but are available to you here. So the first one that Emma mentioned earlier is the ability to do linked reporting here and drill downs. So when I run the report, we're going to be able to click on an order ID to spawn a drill down that's going to display mailing information. Right down here, there's an example of a more advanced function. As you saw for aggregation, you had a limited number of aggregation types. And here we have AggDistinctCount as one of those options. So over here, I also want to draw your attention to these A symbols, and anyone who has used custom conditional formatting before recognizes these as symbols for conditional formatting. Just going to pause for a second. I'm going to deal with a technical issue. Okay. Sorry about that. All right, and last but not least, if I run this report, which we're going to do now, you'll see that we also have zeros here where there might have been blank values or null values otherwise. And these zeros are formatted in red because of our conditional formatting. Maybe we want those zeros to stand out more. Here we can activate the drill down. And if I toggle through here to the end of a group for employee, we also see that we have our aggregation for the AggDistinctCount. So what I want to do is walk you through the process of creating this report, at least in part. So we're going to open a modified version that has some pieces missing, and we're going to walk through it nice and slowly. So looking at this report, we can see that as a pivot table or a standard crosstab, we have our year right here at the top as our tier 1, so to speak, tier 1 column header source, except here we are using a function to isolate the year value in our order date field. And then below that we have some static information here. I just entered in these values statically. They are not spawning from a field for our quarters, Q1, Q2, Q3. Q4 is missing. We're going to be adding that together here. And then below that, we've separated our quarters into months, again using static text input. And so you may be wondering, all right, well, you have all of this static information. How are you going to get the information, the data in your data sources to expand dynamically if you have all of this header information as static text? Well, that we're going to do using our formulas here. So if you have spent some time making formulas in Exago, you know that the way to read a formula is to work from the innermost function out. And so to break this down, and actually we're going to use this formula as an example, I'm going to just pop out of the, actually I'm going to ask Emma to navigate over to where we were before with PDFs and just show you another version of this formula so that we can take a look at it. So what I did is I took that formula and just made all of the functions blue and their corresponding parentheses to signify the opening and closing of that function orange so that they're easier to see. And we're going to work from the innermost function to the outermost function and break down what exactly is being done with the data here. So our innermost function is month in this case. The month function resolves as a number, an integer, that corresponds to the month number in the date field that is its argument. So in this case our date field is orders.orderDate, and so the month function is taking whatever month value exists in that date and giving it a corresponding number. So if the date is 1/1/2014, we know that we're looking at the first day of January in 2014, and this function is going to resolve to the number 1. So that's what's happening there. So the next layer out is an if function. That resolves to one of two values, either the second argument or the third argument. And which it resolves to depends on whether or not the value in question satisfies the first argument, which is our condition. So in this case, we're saying if the month of this particular date is equal to 1, then show this value. Otherwise, show 0. So in the example of using 1/1/2014, we're saying if the month is equal to 1, which in this case it is, then we're going to show the unit price for this particular value that corresponds to this particular date. This is the way we are filtering out all unit prices that are irrelevant to a particular month, so that we can do this dynamic expansion. Because if the unit price does not pertain to January, we're going to be left with 0 instead. And if we look at the outermost function now, which is AggSum, we're going to take whatever unit prices do come through this formula and add them all together. So if we're left with some zeros, that's okay, because they're not going to factor into the final aggregation. So if I go back now to, just a second, if I go back now to Exago, what we can see here is that under January, I'm saying the exact same thing, only I'm removing that outermost AggSum function. I'm saying if the month is equal to 1, show the unit price. For February, if the month is equal to 2, show the unit price, and so on and so forth. For March, we've got 3. For April, we've got 4, which is why building this type of report, while it may seem, while it is a little bit more tedious and time-consuming than creating a crosstab, is actually not so bad once you've created one formula. You can simply duplicate it and add columns as needed or rows as needed. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to select columns L through N here, holding down the Shift key to select them all. And then we're going to just insert columns after. And I'm going to go ahead and merge this column, or rather this cell, with all of those next to it. We're going to use the merge tool here just to maintain our formatting. I'm going to do the same thing here. And then I'm going to go ahead and merge these, and we're going to copy over this header label that we've created for ourselves, holding down the Control key to copy it over, and then we're going to replace that 3 with a 4 for Q4. And then I'm going to copy over these values as well, or maybe just this one. It's a little bit easier to control. And we're going to add in October through December. And as you've noticed, any formatting applied to the parent cell when you copy over will apply to the child cell as well. And now we're going to do the exact same thing with this cell, N5 as it is. We're just going to hold down the Control key and copy it into these following cells, changing the one detail that needs to be changed in order for the formula to apply to October. In this case, we want the month number to equal 10. And we're going to do the same, sorry about that. Same thing for November. I'm going to have that equal to 11 and 12 for December. And what's nice now is because we're using this formula as the base for the formula we're executing in the footer on employee, we can simply copy do this exact same process for the footer because, again, the only detail that needs to change is the month number. So this is 10, 11, and 12. And last but not least, we're going to do the bottom as well. Actually, I want to do it slightly differently. Because these formulas are exactly the same here as they are in the report footer, we're just repeating this calculation for a group versus for the entire report. I'm going to copy over from up here so I don't have to go through the trouble of replacing all of those numbers. And instead, I'm just going to use our formatting tool to change the formatting for this footer. Oops. All right, so that was step one. And so it is just the process of expanding and copying over information to create something like this. And so another functionality that isn't supported in the standard Crosstab but is in this designer would be conditional formatting. And this is covered in the basic training, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. But if you want to apply conditional formatting to a cell, you'll select an action, which is what you want to change about the way this cell is formatted. In this case, we're going to change foreground color, and we're going to change it to red if the cell value is equal to 0. So essentially, let's get those all those null values equal to red. We want to be able to see where and when our employees are not selling products. So I'm going to click OK. And then we're also missing our column for order ID. So what I want to do is add a column after this, copy all of my formatting over. I'm just going to hold down the Control key one more time. We're going to change the header here from product name to order ID. Copy this over, and then we're going to actually do this and apply our order ID field. Right there. Let's change the size. All right. And then what I'm going to do is enter in that linking that we discussed earlier. So using the link reports tools here, I'm going to select the cell that I would like to do drill downs with, and then I'm going to select the report that contains the order information for each ID. And that's the report I've named order information. And click OK. Now we'll see that we have a little linked cell icon here, which is going to activate those drill downs when we're in the HTML viewer. Last but not least, let's use one of the functions that isn't supported in the standard Crosstab, in the Crosstab Designer, which is AggDistinctCount, and we'll do a distinct count on our order ID so that we can count those unique values. And we're going to copy that here and then use our formatting paintbrush one more time. To copy all that over. So now the report is as it was originally when I showed you the final product, but we're going to go ahead and run it just to see that one more time. We have our drill downs here. We have our zeros, and they're formatted in red. And when we move over to look at a report footer, or rather a group footer, we have our distinct count. But as you'll notice, because I carried over formatting from these cells right here, this is formatted as a currency, and I would want to go back and change that. You can do that very easily by right-clicking and click Format Cells. Go to Number and change to General as opposed to currency, and then we can do the same thing here. Okay. So I'm going to pause for questions at this point. There is going to following this, Emma is going to walk you through how to do year-over-year percentage calculations in a static crosstab, which is another thing that isn't supported in the Crosstab widget. But for the moment, I want to give everyone a chance to digest what they just saw. So there was a question just asking for clarification on, hold on one moment. Right, so there was a question which I think may be relevant to the group on whether I'm working in a Crosstab Designer or a Standard Report Designer. This is a Standard Report Designer. The way that you can tell the difference between the two is Crosstabs are a widget. So sort of like a chart is a widget, it sort of is its own entity. So if we go into this Crosstab report we saw earlier, if I hover over this, you'll see that I can't really interact with individual cells the way I can in a standard report. There's actually this outline going around the outside. When I double click it, the way to interact with this Crosstab and make changes to it is through the Crosstab Designer. So a crosstab you can either create by moving through the Crosstab Designer and creating your crosstab that way, or you can create a standard report and then use, I believe it's this one right here, you can use the Crosstab Wizard to insert a crosstab into the report footer of your standard report. So it's something that you can kind of plug in to a standard report if you wish, just the way you would plug in a chart or gauge or something like that, and we have tools for those up here as well. So it's sort of like a special kind of report that you can place within a standard report, but functions differently and has different capabilities than a standard report does. I hope that answers the question.
Great. All right. So I think Nicole did a really great job of clarifying the difference between crosstabs and this static crosstab that we are showing you all how to create. There's another question I wanted to address really quickly. I think it might benefit the whole group just because the confusion might be universal. I mentioned that in pseudo crosstabs we can add a year-over-year percentage comparison, and I'm going to go back into our Crosstab report right here and go into the wizard just so I can show you the difference between what we can do with that and what we are doing in here when we select percent calculations. So in the Crosstab wizard, if I go into my tabulation options and select percent of column here, it's going to give me the percentage of the revenue that was generated for that column. So if my column is year, it's going to give me the percentage of revenue, of the total revenue that was generated in that year. So that's really great. What I would like to do now is compare the percentages. So I don't want to see what percent of the total revenue was generated in year one. I want to know how much more revenue did I generate in year two. I want to know the percent increase or decrease of revenue from year one to year two. So that can be super handy, and that's the final thing that we want to illustrate for you guys in here. So I'm going to clean up a little bit, and we're going to make sure that there's no more questions, and then we'll move forward to the last little tidbit of information for today. All right, great. So it looks good. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So this is one of the main functionalities that is gained when you're using a standard report structured such as to mimic a crosstab. As we touched on, we do have options for the summary of the tabulation data in the crosstabs, but as we said, here we want to show year-over-year differences. So I'm going to run this report so that I can show you exactly what the final output is and what we're looking to do, and then we'll walk through how we did it. And a lot of it Nicole already covered, so it's going to be mainly just an explanation of how we obtained these year-over-year percentages. Okay, so in this example, we are tracking revenue for quarter 3 in 2014 and then again in 2015. So of course, as Nicole's crosstab was showing you, we can create a crosstab looking report in the standard report designer that does go for years and years. It does not need to be at this small. For the purposes showing you these percentages, it's easier to just consider 1 quarter rather than a full 2 years and having to page through 24 months instead of just 6 here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead into the designer just really quickly, and we'll look at this formula. So this formula, and I'm going to open up the editor just to better illustrate it. So as Nicole walked you through, we're again using an if formula and an ag sum. We're also using the month here, which you are used to. What we've added is this and. So the and is within the if. It's contained within the if. So this gives the if statement 2 arguments for that first argument, and it will only evaluate to true if they are both true. So in this case, our if statement is asking if all of this is true, return order details.revenue. If any of this is false, return 0. So what makes this true? This first argument is true if the year of the order date, so if we pull the year out of the order date, if it is 2014, and then we pull the month out of the order date and it's July, we want to return order details.revenue. Anything else, we return 0. And then since we're summing all of this, we're going to get the total revenue for July of 2014. And if there was none, we'll get 0, but it'll add up all of the revenue. Okay, and then again, we've repeated this formula, and you can see that the only thing changed here is an 8 for the month, which is incorrect. We want 8, 9, and 10. Great. Nope, that's a lie. We did want 9. It's the labels that are backwards. For illustration purposes, it does not matter which months we're reporting on because we're comparing the same data, but I do want this to be accurate. Okay. And then what we have down here, and I'll go back to our output, this is the percent change from 2014 to 2015. So for the month of what we know is now July, we had 143% increase in revenue. Now, this data is a little wonky because we are using Northwind, so the numbers are maybe not applicable. You can see we had 1,943% increase in revenue from 2014 to 2015. Ignore the fact that they're not really realistic, but this is the type of data that we are trying to show you that you can create. Then if we go back here, this is a super simple calculation. Since we did all of our aggregating and collection of revenue pertaining to the correct month, up here, all we have to do down here is cell reference that. So here we're cell referencing the difference between G4 and C4, which is going to be the July total and the July total for 2014. So we're finding the difference between the totals of 2015 and 2014 for this month. We're dividing it by the total of July for 2014 and then multiplying by 100, of course, so that it takes the form of a percent. We're doing the same calculation here, but for August and then for September as well. And then we also have the total year over year over here. So we can see what percent change we had for each month. We can see what percent change we had for the entire year, and it really gives us an idea of where the company is going in terms of, are we growing, are we losing revenue, how are we doing? All right, so we can do this for each month in quarter 3, and then we are given the percent increase or decrease for every month. So if we go back to this output, this looks like a crosstab, and if I was to expand it so that it was for all of 2014 and all of 2015, it would accomplish all of the functionality that is really the purpose of using the Crosstab widget, but you would also have these additional capabilities. So that being said, I'm going to see if there were any questions that came in while we were doing this. There was a question. If this is recorded, this is going to be recorded. You guys receive the distribution right after. And great. It looks like we're doing great. We'll be here for a couple minutes to keep answering questions, and if you're still typing, feel free to send them in. We'll hang out for a minute. But that's all we wanted to show you guys for today, so thank you so much for coming. We really enjoyed this. This is something that's a lot of fun for us to share the little tidbits that we find when we're working in the application with you guys, and we hope it helps. All right, it appears the questions have slowed. I don't think there's any more that would benefit the whole group. We will follow up afterwards individually with all of you that still have outstanding questions, of course. In conclusion, thank you so much for coming. We really, as always, appreciate it so much and would love to hear from you on that survey that you will be prompted with right after exiting this webinar. Thank you so much for attending, everybody, and Happy New Year's again. Enjoy the rest of your week.